Relations for Outfront Kalamazoo. And thank you so much for joining us tonight for Outfront Kalamazoo's Pride and Joy, a celebration of intersectional storytelling. This event is presented by Bell's Brewery and is sponsored by Zoetis and BookBug. I'm here this afternoon with Kiana Glide, Amy O'Hanlon, and Marshall Kilgore. And today we're going to be discussing how we find pride and joy in our intersectional identities and how we celebrate that through literature. So let's begin by having all three of you introduce yourselves, your name, anything you want to tell us about yourselves before we start.
Thank you, yeah. Well, my name's Marshall Kilgore. Pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm fortunate enough to be the Director of Advocacy here at Outfront Kalamazoo. I'm a community organizer here at Kalamazoo, and I love where I live and work, and I love our community.
Tell us about your book.
Oh, yeah, great. Oh, yeah. We are talking about literature, right?
Yeah.
And so I brought with me here today, and it's my favorite book. I've been reading it since I was like 8. It's called I, Tina by, of course, Tina Turner and Kurt Loder. Amazing autobiography of the Queen of Rock and Roll, Tina Turner, and we'll get into that more later.
Hi, my name's Amy O'Hanlon, and I'm a bookseller at BookBug, and this is a bookstore, and I guess I'm the book-selling representative here. So the book that I decided I wanted to talk about today are a couple, actually. I wanted to talk about The Magic Fish and Look by Zan Romanoff. And The Magic Fish is a middle-grade graphic novel about a first-generation Vietnamese boy who is trying to come out to his mom, and she's trying to learn English. And through the guise of like telling stories to each other, they sort of reveal things about themselves. And then the second book that I wanted to talk about is Look, and that is a story about a high schooler in LA who is Jewish and gay, and sort of coming to terms with that through like discovering self-worth and what it means to be a feminist and what it means to, I guess, stand up for yourself in a time of social media. So, yeah.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Bookseller.
Hi, my name's Kiana Glide. I'm the Operations and Communications intern here at Outfront Kalamazoo. In addition to that, I'm also a writer. I've been published in the Huffington Post, the Washington Post, Cafe Mom, and The Lily. And today I'm going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite books, The Kiss Quotient by Helen Hahn. And this book is a diverse reverse retelling of Pretty Woman with a Vietnamese love interest and an autistic love interest. And it really spoke to me. So that's the book I'll be talking about today.
Fantastic. So I think, Marshall, I want to start with you. Tell us a little bit about what I, Tina is about first, and then you can kind of go into, how that, influences your image of yourself and your own intersectionality. I know you said that you have been reading it since you were young, so, especially growing up with that book always kind of with you, how did that influence how you see yourself as an intersectional person today?
Well, yeah, this little book from 1985, it is the life story, it's I, Tina, the life story of Tina Turner, right? And Tina Turner is the queen of rock and roll, as I said, but little young girl born in Nutbush, Tennessee, which Nutbush is legit a village in Tennessee outside of Brownsville, if anyone's from Tennessee. And this little black girl ends up, really being a huge figure within the rock and roll industry, which is very much a boys club, very much a European boys club, but very much a white boys club.
Right.
And how does this little girl from Tennessee, this village of a few dozen families, become this breakout star? And it's really interesting because you get to go from her roots in Tennessee to working her way up in St. Louis as, these bluesy, smoke-filled nightclubs. And then you get, of course, her rocky marriage that so many of us know about, right? And being a domestic violence survivor for 16 years in a very abusive and hard relationship. And then you get to see her work hard, right, on the in Vegas, right, in show tunes and doing 5 shows a night, right, for folks in boring hotels. And then finally, it brings you right up into the time where she's writing the book in 1985, which is her comeback era of Private Dancer, which is her, where she got her first #1 solo hit, which is What's Love Got to Do With It, which is a great song so many of us know. But I thought about the book for intersectionality because she never accepted no for an answer. It was never, she never allowed herself to be put in a box. And so many of us, when we think of intersectionality, we're put into a box. So we can only be one thing at one time for the rest of our lives. Whereas it's really not true. We can be many things, many times, at many points of our lives. And so that's the awesome thing about this book, is it teaches you to not take no for an answer. And I've read it over and over and over again, and I will continue to, because she teaches you that throughout the book.
Absolutely, I love that, and I really like how, you mentioned it coming into her comeback era as she's writing the book. Do you feel like that has anything to do with, how you feel about how that relates to yourself, like kind of like a comeback era? Did you have kind of a moment like that?
No, but I think that is, it's something that we can all aspire to do, right? Of we get knocked down and life is really, really hard for a lot of us. And there is sort of like this, what is the light at the end of the tunnel? What is all of this for? What are all the trials and tribulations for?
Right.
And maybe it won't be a comeback era for all of us, but it will be the come up for so many of us. So that's sort of how I focus on it, is there is some justice after all. If this woman went through all of this, right, being dirt poor and legit picking cotton and berries, right, in Tennessee, to filling stages, being the best solo, the most sold solo performer ever. Outshining Madonna, the Beatles, no shade to any of them. But, that is something we can look forward to, is you can be intersectional. You can be more than one thing, right? Take me, for example, being Black and bisexual. You can be both of those things and be very successful at whatever you want if you don't stop. I think the lesson in this book is persistence, believing in yourself, and knowing that, there is going to be some justice in that.
Absolutely, I love that. And so,
Do you mind? Oh, I was
yeah,
going to ask,
go
can we
ahead.
add things?
Oh, absolutely. No,
I was just gonna say,
totally.
of course, we're not allowed to talk to each other. No, I think that what you were talking about, her saying, like, no to being put in a box. I was talking to, I was, like, watching this panel, and then afterwards there was this discussion between a whole bunch of, it was like Asian American, Pacific Islander, and Native Hawaiian aspiring authors, and we were all sort of talking to each other and having a discussion. And it was really interesting because every single person had a completely different story. Like, there's no, oh, you're Asian, so therefore you're this kind of thing. So yeah, it's the same thing where it's like, every single person is a different story from the get-go.
And we should be proud of it.
Yeah.
I think we should. I mean, we talk about Pride Month, and so many people look at that negatively, like we're being, too full of ourselves, but we should take pride in ourselves, and we don't do that enough.
Absolutely. And I think, Amy, which did you want to talk about both books and kind of touch on how both of them, come into your life or influenced your life as an intersectional person? Which one do you want to start with?
I guess the one I'll start with is Look. So I came across this book before it was even a book. I went to this panel where this editor was talking about like what character means in stories, and so she was giving us different excerpts of different stories. And for some reason, this excerpt, which is like just 3 paragraphs from the point of view, it's third person, but a really close third person from the point of view of this girl who's at a party, but she's in the bathroom by herself and she's taking selfies. So she wants to have this like, I don't know, this feeling of that she's with people, but she's isolated. It was like, it spoke to me in a way that I didn't understand because I'm not into the selfie world. I'm not huge into social media. She was super vain. I was like, why do I love this character? So when the book came out, like a year and a half later, I finally read it. And it was like, I guess there's this dichotomy between being supremely self-aware and then at the same time like almost intentionally blind to other parts of yourself.
Mhm.
And I think a lot of kids these days, and I know I was as well, like, you know, how do you say it? Like, because we are raised in a world where everyone's looking at you, you have to know exactly what all of your angles are, but at the same time, there's like this inner, like, shame, not necessarily hurt, but like things that you want to keep close to your chest, and so you keep it so close that you kind of don't even realize that it's there. And so, yeah, in the story, she accidentally filmed a video of herself kissing a girl and then posted it onto like the Snapchat equivalent in the story.
Oh.
And that was kind of how she came out. And what she was doing was she was sort of using, she was attracted to girls, but she didn't understand that that was what was happening. So she was with her boyfriend and trying to say, hey, wouldn't it be sexy of me to like take pictures of me kissing other girls? And he was like, I don't know what's going on here, but okay. And I don't know what it was that spoke to me about that, but like just the fact that she couldn't help but be herself, but was hiding it so much so that she couldn't recognize it in herself. And as the story goes along, she starts to realize like, oh, other people's perceptions of me isn't the end all be all. I need to be who I am for me. And yeah, it's a really beautiful story. I don't know if I'm selling it very well, but it's complicated, and that's what people are.
No, I think that's so true that we all have, you know, like you said, you always know how to get that perfect angle when you're
Yeah.
taking photos of yourself or anything like that, but then simultaneously there are things like maybe I don't like this side of my face,
Right.
so I always take pictures of this
Right.
side of my face.
Yeah.
So there's parts of us that we show to the world and parts of us that we, whether consciously, knowingly or not, hide from
Yeah.
the world. I mean, you know, you don't even think, oh, this is my bad side. You just take a picture on the side you know, quote unquote,
Yeah.
is your good side.
And then if you tell somebody and they're like, wow, that's weird, you realize like, oh my gosh, I'm like micromanaging myself in a way. But yeah, so I guess that's what I was connecting to.
Yeah, absolutely. And then now the second book.
The second book is The Magic Fish, and it's set in the 90s. So
Which is technically historical.
which is historical now. So no, I was connecting to it because I'm a
Wow.
child of the 90s, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I just had to throw that little tidbit in
Yeah,
there.
that was a long time ago. A long time ago. And I mean, I'm second generation, but the protagonist is first generation. His mom is trying to learn English. So when they're reading these fairy tales to each other, it's sort of like a block, but it's also a way to expose things. So it's a really, really cool story, and the art is phenomenal, but each different part is told in different color schemes. So we see some of the mom's story and coming to terms with, even though she was the one who left, there were a lot of feelings of abandonment and loss and grief in that. And then we also have the boy's story, and he is, you know, recognizing, oh, I have a crush on this boy for the first time. What does it mean if I have to tell, you know, this private Catholic school, but then also what does it mean when I have to tell, you know, my immigrant mother? And how is that gonna happen? Like, I don't know. It's just, yeah, so also complicated. I wonder if stories are complicated, but yeah, like it has just
I
these
like what
different
you
stories.
said though, that's so human though,
Yeah.
right? And then once again, when we're hitting on intersectionality of what is wrong with being complicated?
That's true.
Right? What
That's
teaches
what
us
we
that? I
are.
don't know if society preaches that or what, of where we should be so simple and so understandable and so
Yeah.
palatable to just be this one thing.
I agree
Whereas
with
we
that.
are all so deeply intersectional and so deeply complicated,
Mhm.
and we should take that from one another and enjoy that
Right.
perspective. I mean, you're selling it well. to
Okay,
me.
good. Yeah, sometimes I
think-
feel like I'm equivocating a little bit, you
Yeah.
know, like can't be one thing, but then who is one thing?
Who
So, yeah.
is, right? It sounds like a beautiful story.
You should take a look at
Yes.
it.
Keep
Fuck,
selling,
it is a
keep selling.
Yes. Quick drop in there. Turns it off. They're really great.
And we will have a list for everybody who's watching at home. We'll have a list from BookBug. We collaborated with BookBug to make a great list of adult books, books for teenagers, and books for children that we will be linking in the description of this video and on our website, definitely. So, you know, if you're interested in any of these books or any of the, you know, other potential Pride Month books that BookBug has to offer, definitely we'll put that link in the description. We can check that out after this. And now, Kiana, tell us about the KISS quotient.
Well, the KISS quotient is about she's like a mathematician or statistician named Stella who has autism. And because of that, she doesn't really relate to the outside world. She has her little quirks and behaviors, and she's closed off. So she goes on this app and finds the love interest, Michael, and hires him to teach her about love, sex, and relationships. And he is strapped for money, so he agrees to this. And in the whole process of this dynamic, they end up falling in love with each other. But the thing about the story that made it so different to me is his love for her didn't cure her neurodiversity. It existed. It was a part of the story, part of the world even, and he didn't try to cure her or anything like that. One of the jobs he did besides being a sex worker is he worked in his mother's tailor shop, and he was really passionate about clothes and sewing. And Stella, the character, certain fabrics would bother her skin and mess with her head, and so he would tailor clothes for her a certain way, or design an outfit for her and sew it for her, just so, because he knew what would mess with her, and he would do those things as a way of showing his love for her. And so those kind of touching things are in the book. And so that's kind of what it is about, what the dynamic between the two characters are. There's no shaming of her diagnosis or him being a sex worker or anything like that. And it was just such a positive, diverse read, and both characters bring each other into their worlds, Michael with the sewing, Stella with the mathematician, statistician, things, she believes math unites the universe. And yes. And so just all of those things.
She's an interesting character.
Yeah. Just drew me to this book, and every time I read it, it just makes me so happy.
Yeah.
And relating it to my intersectionality again is going back to where there was no shaming of anybody's I don't know how to say it, identities in this book, from what career they had or chose or were doing at that moment, to their diagnosis or their little quirks or things that they did that made them different from normal people. And relating that to my own life, it was just something that, okay, I have this thing, I do things this certain way, that doesn't make me bad or faulty or wrong. That's just the way I exist.
Yeah.
So.
And now I want to bring it back around to Marshall with Itina to talk about how you feel like this book touches on the joys that you experience as an intersectional person. Because a lot of times I feel like we talk about the struggles that we go through in our intersectionality, and that's absolutely a valid conversation. But this is all about the joys that we have as intersectional individuals. So how did Itina kind of bring about those things for you, or kind of show you oh, this is something that I have too, that I'm proud of, or I'm very happy about in my life, or anything like that?
Yeah, well, talking about joy, we just talked about differences, right? And what makes that differences are good, or we should celebrate diversity or differences and things like that. And I think of one part of the book of where she talks about how originally in the 60s, when she was first coming out in St. Louis in those smoky nightclubs, the women had the long, think of Marilyn Monroe, those long gloves and the long dresses. And she was dancing so hard and up there doing the Tina Turner, and she would rip those dresses. And so sooner or later, she just said, forget it, and would cut them off and make them shorter dresses. And exactly what made her different and made her stand out is what, began getting the accolades and began for folks to see, wow, this woman has something different and that she truly is talented. And so that's something that I like to think about with the book, right? And that I mirror with my life of what makes me different, right? With these different intersectional and different identities within myself, really can get you noticed and really can allow people to see that you have these awesome aspects of you, right? Not going with the status quo can allow you to rise in many situations, right? And can get your voice heard of it is awesome sometimes when, you know, we think of Black Lives Matter, right, as a community organizer. It was very interesting to lift my voice as a bisexual black male about this, right? And that was something that was a different perspective and allowed for journalists in the community to hear it a little bit louder than just someone who may not have been a part of the community. And so that type of thing, that brings me joy. It brings me joy that we can celebrate that diversity and celebrate those different aspects. But thinking of Tina, I think of that, of ripping the dresses and being herself, right? It's something that she powered through and found joy in. No one was, also during that time, Black women were not wearing their hair super long either. She was the first to like do the whole wig thing, right? So many people love wigs within our community, and you can thank Tina. And there's so much joy in that, right? Of she really developed this personality that was her own, and so that's another thing that I love within this book that I constantly have to go back to. There's no shame in I've dressed the same. I've always said I've dressed like a third grade teacher for all of my life, because that's what I wanted to be for all of my life. I've told folks that, everyone knows that, but you know, there was no shame in that. And so when the other, you know, third and fourth grade little boys when I was young were wearing, you know, shorts and basketball tops or whatever, I was, you know, in my little sweater vest and tie and all that. I did all of it, right? But I was developing that persona in person just as Tina did. There was no shame in it, as we spoke about earlier. And that's something that I find joy in. Of we can define that in literature and within books of owning our identity and owning who we are. There can be so much joy in that once we finally do it. And this book serves as a constant reminder for that for me.
Absolutely, and I think that's a great metaphor that you have to rip the dress.
Yeah.
You have to rip the dress.
Because it's never gonna fit if it's not meant for you. Someone needs that pretty long dress, right? And that was the Supremes, that was all of those women of that era. But that wasn't her. And there was nothing wrong with that.
And when you know that something's not you,
right,
you have to rip the dress. You have to. Okay, and then now Amy, so how do you feel like these books have touched on your joys as an intersectional person?
Right. I think, you know, in a similar way, my version of expression is through drawing and through writing. So I don't know if they, you know, directly were an inspiration for me or helped me find myself in a certain way, because they were in the last year or so. But as a person who's learning how to put myself into my stories, they were pretty inspirational in that way, I guess. So yeah, I guess trying to say that in a more cohesive manner. Let me see. I guess, you know how they say that writing, you have to use your own well. You sort of have to be all of yourself and put all of you into the thing. Art, writing, it's all a self-portrait, and coming to terms with who you are and being excited about it and wanting to celebrate it and share it with people. It's intensely personal, but it's also very, very rewarding.
Oh yeah, and I think that's beautiful. You know, putting so much of yourself into something, and to read these books and see, oh, you know, I can do that.
Yeah.
I can put all of myself into this and be not only rewarded for it in, you know, whatever way, but also feel so fulfilled in doing that and saying, I put myself into this piece, or, you know, this piece of writing, this piece of art, this song, whatever it is, I put my whole self into it. And, you know, whatever makes up your identity, it's in that piece, and it shines through. I think that's absolutely beautiful.
Like, the first time I saw like a mixed race person in a story and had it be part of the story and it was important and both of the cultures were addressed, it was like, oh, that's allowed, that can be there. So yeah, definitely.
And I think it speaks to how important that kind of representation is in literature. You know, we talk about representation in the media. in literature, you know, it's also so important because you might not be watching it on a screen, but you get to be in that character's head, you know, depending on what perspective it's written from. You really get to experience, you know, everything this character goes through, and you get to create that in your own head rather than watching it on a screen. So I think that's, you know, that just reminds me of how important that kind of representation is
Absolutely.
in literature.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And now, Kiana, you know, with the KISS quotient, how does this touch on your joys as an intersectional person?
Well, like for me, as like brain fart.
Yes, not just me.
Okay, so for me as a romance writer and romance reader, like I love love. Like
Yeah.
romantic love, friend love, like platonic love. I'm all about that. So just reading about it fills me with joy on a base level. So diving a bit deeper into that, like seeing love between two drastically different people that don't try to change each other once they fall in love was just refreshing to see. The diversity between the two leads was refreshing to see. The way that their different perspectives were handled, like I feel like Helen's writing is very lyrical, and just seeing the way that she presented things just it made my heart squeeze. That's my inner fangirl talking. Like there's a moment where Michael takes Stella to a nightclub and she's trying to hide her diagnosis from him, but loud noises are a trigger for her. And suddenly the DJ starts playing this really loud, booming music, and she runs out in a panic and is literally on the ground shaking and trying to catch her breath. And so he goes to her and takes her home, and just the way that it was presented as such a real moment that just like really spoke to me. Like there was just so much joy, and it's weird to say that there was so much joy in seeing something that was traumatic, but it was just portrayed so straightforwardly. So it wasn't trauma porn.
Yeah.
Per se. It was just like, this is an experience that some people with this diagnosis go through. And like, the whole book is like that. So like, that brought me joy.
You felt recognition in that.
So much recognition. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's always so nice to see parts of ourselves and things that other people write. You know, I relate really heavily to that, for example, in, you know, two people coming together who are very different from each other in their backgrounds and things like that, but they don't try to change each other for each other. And neither of them try to change themselves for each other, it sounds like, either.
She does try to make some changes at the end, if I could read a quote.
Oh yeah, go ahead, absolutely.
I'll reference my
It's bookmarked.
well-worn, beat-up copy here. It's one of my favorite quotes, and it's one that's been well quoted. So, she swiped her nails through her hair, tearing strands from the tie. There was no point in working to snare a man who didn't love her as she was. No one benefited from that, least of all her. It wasn't fair, and it wasn't honest. It wasn't her. This crusade to fix herself was ending right now. She wasn't broken. She saw and interacted with the world in a different way, but that was her. She could change her actions, change her words, change her appearance, but she couldn't change the root of herself. At her core, she would always be autistic. People called it a disorder, but it didn't feel like one. To her, it was simply the way she was.
That's a
Beautiful
fantastic,
quote,
yeah, absolutely fantastic quote. And I think that really speaks to that point where, you know, you can try really hard to change yourself for somebody else, but at your core, you are who you are for a reason, and you're not broken because of it. Okay, so, you know, I want to open it up to the three of you now to see if there's anything else that you wanted to touch on within these books that really, you know, either reminds you of yourself or touches on your intersectionality or, you know, anything to that effect. The floor is yours.
No pressure.
No pressure, yeah. I'm trying to think of really good parts.
Can we just talk?
Oh, go for it, yeah.
Go ahead.
I guess I was gonna say, like, I feel like there's a stigma about romance novels that, I don't know how correct it was, but maybe in the older era it was, but that they kind of tend to be not so kind to one of the other person.
Mhm.
And then I feel like it's changing these days. There's a lot more books that I'm recognizing as like, I don't know, good for people, and it's really uplifting.
Yeah.
Have you noticed that?
That's something that's really changed over the years. Like, I first started reading romance 2017. I saw an ad and a little free handout about this book called The Wedding Date, and it was a diverse romance with a plus size black lead, and I was like, oh my god, I have to read that. And that just started me on this path of reading all the books I could find and trying to write my own stories and things like that. And I've noticed there's been this seismic shift in the way that like more diverse authors are being pushed to the forefront. Like, you've got best-selling works by neurodivergent authors, authors of color, authors that share all these different sectionalities that are like writing these love stories, and these characters that they write also share those same like intersectionalities, and it's just so good to see. Like, I was never a fan of like those, I call them they call them bodice rippers, like from the 80s. Like, I like the art on them, but like I've never really read those. So like today, not yours. Like, I don't know if you guys ever remember those like covers with the half-naked guys on them, and they're
With
like
the long hair, like floppy.
Yes,
Like
and that's like
background.
become this romance novel stereotype.
And that's
But,
what
like,
I think of when I think of
Yeah.
romance.
Yeah.
This makes me want to read it more, especially the quote. It's exactly what we're discussing on the head of.
Yeah,
that
the
there's
author-
no use of trying to fit into these boxes.
yeah, the author herself is autistic, so
Oh my goodness.
yeah,
wow.
so she's speaking directly from her own experience. Well, not so much the Pretty Woman aspect, but
Right.
her own experiences
Yeah.
in writing this. So like, just to see the like genre evolve beyond that and include so many people from other aspects of the world and so many different like perspectives has just been a joy to see.
Yeah, it seems really positive.
Yeah, and it feels so much more welcoming.
Yeah, yeah.
I know you said that you
Amy,
were
that was. Oh, sorry.
Oh, no,
that
go
was.
ahead.
She's definitely writing from her own well, right?
Yeah,
Like,
definitely.
her mom-
Yeah,
like,
like,
if you wanting to be a middle grade author and illustrator, I know
Yeah.
like you've probably seen, especially as like a bookstore author, so many more changes in like the books you're seeing in the books that are going to the bestseller list and things like that.
Definitely. It's definitely felt like it's like transforming in a really good way. There was some news a little while ago, a couple of days ago, that they're not going to do own voices anymore because it's been kind of like co-opted in a way. But you know, that sort of started a trend of people being like, wait a second, we need to see representation. No, we need to see representation from the people who are representing those different aspects of the world. And yeah, so I think it's reflected in the bookstore really positively.
And that's actually a great question. You know, as a bookseller who spends all day in a bookstore, how have you seen these kinds of trends that shift? And you know, I'm seeing, especially whenever I go into BookBug or look at the website or anything like that, I'm seeing so many more pride-oriented books and books about intersectionality that touch on intersectional subjects. How have you kind of seen those trends kind of change and evolve over the years?
Well, I've only been a bookseller for about a year and a half,
Okay.
so it hasn't been that long. But the reason why I actually wanted to work at BookBug, I was still in California at the time, and I found like an Instagram post, and I was like, I want to be there. And I already knew I was moving to Kalamazoo, but it felt like a sign, so I applied before I'd even moved. Yeah, I think that that bookstore in particular, they're great because the owner, Joanna, she just wants us to help curate the list. So what the booksellers are interested in, we're bringing it. And so that means, you know, we want to see parts of ourselves, so we're putting in books that that are queer, that are different races, that have different neurodiversities. Like, so it's, I'm sure it has transformed, but I feel like it's always been the case, at least from the independent bookseller point of view, to say, I want to see myself reflected in these titles.
Absolutely, and it's wonderful to have an opportunity to do that, and then to share them with everyone else, so that people can, you know, come in and say, hey, wait a minute, I think that I see myself in this, I'm going to check that out,
Yeah.
kind of thing. That just, I imagine, gives people so much joy walking into the store and saying, I see myself there.
Yeah, or even if you don't realize that's yourself. You know, a lot of the times in middle grade, you don't know what you're going to be attracted to.
Right.
Or if you're attracted to anybody. So, like, having the opportunity to see different walks of life and live in them and walk in them for a little while sort of gets you the chance to open up and expand. And yeah, it's really cool seeing the community be so open and excited about the titles as well.
Absolutely. And then Marshall, did you have anything else to add about ITINA or anything, from your experience?
Well, yeah, I think with intersectionality, I want to say too and I think all of the books that we shared today too. I can't sing, I can't dance. I do like to dance, but I'm not the best at dancing, I should say. But I'm definitely not selling out arenas like her, right? But when we look at intersectionality, there's a lot of joy and there's a lot of pride we can find with looking and sharing other stories, right? And that's what makes books so great. And so I think with intersectionality, more folks should start looking at other people's stories of, okay, take me for example, bisexual black male, community organizer, nonprofit leader, whatever you want to call it, and then looking at this black woman who is in this white world, right? This white entertainment world, rock and roll, right? And she wants to be this rock and roll goddess, right? And so what I took from her is you keep at it, right? You stay at what you want to do. You stand firmly in who you are, no matter how much junk you get, or for me, right, how negative comments or homophobic comments or whatever it may be. For her, it was really crappy hotels to play at, right? Until you get to those arenas, right? So keep playing the crappy hotels. Keep, hearing no's, right, and not taking them for an answer. And so we can sort of learn from those stories, right? You don't have to be doing the same things or experiencing the same things as these characters, but you can learn from their actions and learn from sort of their attitude about it. That's what I really take from the book, is the attitude of, I'm not stopping, regardless of the fact if society says we should, and we should be in one place. And so that was the biggest thing of, nope, I don't have the hair, I don't have the bodies, I don't have the legs, I can't sing, I can't dance. But dang it, I can't have that attitude of, this is what I want and I'm gonna take it, right? And I'm going to go and get what I want out of the world, why I'm here. And I encourage more folks to have that type of attitude. And that's why I would say read the book. So even if you're like, oh, I hate rock and roll and I listen to talk radio like my mom, who only listens to NPR, read the book, because it is so the attitude of whatever you're going at. If you're a chef, whatever it is, keep going at it.
Yeah.
Perseverance.
Do you feel like 8-year-old you connected to this book in a way because there were other books that didn't have like the representation? I don't know how many young black characters there were in children's books when you were growing up.
Well, and I love that you asked that question, Amy, is because she always knew she wasn't good at picking cotton, didn't like picking cotton.
Right.
And I felt that same way, right? Of like, I definitely didn't have to pick cotton, thank God, thank you God. But there was things that I had to do, right, of being jammed by society and family into that. You're gonna play football and basketball and be that little black boy, right?
And you're in your sweater vest.
Right. And I'm going, no, I don't want that. I don't know what it is, but it's not this.
Yeah.
And throughout the book, she says that, right? Of whether it was the picking cotton in Nutbush or it was the crappy marriage of, there's something better. Yeah. There's something better. There is justice after all. We just have to find it. And that's sort of what it was. And so, there was a deep connection of that. And a lot of the books of, like you were saying, of writing books for younger folks and adolescents, there wasn't a lot of books. The books that were getting sort of recommended to me were, once again, those fitting that role of, oh, look at this, A student basketball player. Read the book about that, right? I don't care what basketball Henry's shooting. I want something different, something. And also something about conquering, right? I was extremely bullied for being so intersectional, right? I was raised in a very small white town, and so it was just sort of like, how can you escape that, right? How can you escape all of these identities that are attached to you before you even open up your mouth?
Yeah.
And that's what Itina did for me. It's helped me escape that box.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, and it
That's
was really,
awesome.
yeah, so all those books on the racks, no offense to the no offense to the booksellers in that
found
small
yours.
town.
You found
but
what
that
you,
small
you
amount-
found what you needed in that time.
Well,
That's
and
the power of literature.
Yes, and I've told people a million times this was the only time I got in trouble for reading was from Itina. It's because I kept it too long. And so the library, I think you only owe like $1.45. It was something so
You
small.
rebel.
You know, I know. Right? Rebel rouser. But I had kept it too long because it was so good, and I had to request it. I had to ask the librarian to, hey, do you have Itina? Because I had seen it on YouTube, you know, and oh my gosh, boom! And thankfully they got it from a different branch, and it was there for me.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, I think this has been absolutely fantastic. I think we've had such good conversation here about, you know, pride and joy and celebrating intersectionality, especially in literature. And I want to thank all three of you for being here today, for doing this with us. And I want to also thank, again, our presenting sponsor, Bell's Brewery. I want to thank our sponsors, Zoetis and BookBug. And, you know, for all of you at home, like I said earlier, we have a full list of amazing Pride books this year on BookBug's website. That'll be linked from our website under this video and all that good stuff. So thank you again.